My name is Thomas Aker. I'm 14 years old and I go to Camp Alberta High School.
Hi, I'm Crystal Aker and I am Thomas's mom. Thomas's older brother, Caden, was first admitted to the hospital when he was 6 years old, and they told us that he just had a viral infection that caused these things. And so we had a handful of hospital admittances each time, then telling us different reasons as to why they were there. But then when Thomas was 4, he got sick, and it was kind of the way it looked, a spike of fever, and then pretty much become super lethargic, lay on the couch for almost 24 hours, hardly able to eat, drink. They just would sleep. And then about a day later, they would wake up vomiting. And so with Thomas, that happened. We took him to the hospital and was still awake. You could kind of shake him and he'd open his eyes and look at you, but just super lethargic. They tested his blood, and then all of a sudden there was I swear there was 20 something nurses, all these people coming in doing all these things, and I looked at the nurse and I was like, what's going on? She's like, well, his blood sugar is kind of low. And I was like, okay, what is it? And so it was a 15, which normal people's blood sugar shouldn't be lower than 80. So basically, she told me that most patients that she sees with that low of a blood sugar are completely unresponsive or dead. So Thomas should have probably had multiple seizures. He should have had a lot of things happen to him. His body was shutting down, but they ended up being able to balance everything out, and he walked out of the hospital as if nothing happened 2 days later.
Adrenal insufficiency is a lack of a hormone called cortisol. And cortisol is an important hormone to do many different things in the body. Probably most importantly, it helps maintain your blood sugar and blood pressure, prevents symptoms like nausea and vomiting. And so it's a very important hormone, especially when your body's in a state of stress. So if your body is undergoing a surgery or you have a significant illness, your body will naturally make more cortisol. So someone with adrenal insufficiency can't mount an appropriate response to that. And so it can get sicker in those conditions.
When Thomas was first diagnosed, he was super tan. And that was one of the first signs that there was a problem.
I take hydrocortisone and fludrocortisone. One thing that it has affected is habit making. I have to make a habit because I have to take it 3 times a day, so that's one thing it has affected. And it also affects my performance in sports, and it can also affect my mental status.
Anytime you are doing anything, you're producing cortisol. And because he can't produce it at the same rate as someone else, if he's not taking his pills, he's going to become fatigued quicker. When he's playing sports, he has to be careful for any injuries, but it's just really important for him to make sure that he's taking them every time.
And if I don't take my hydrocortisone, it will usually lead to fatigue, and
it can lead to an adrenal crisis.
So an adrenal crisis is where your body goes into a state of shock where they can get severely hypotensive, which is low blood pressure, severely hypoglycemic, which is low blood sugar. And, you could potentially die, and that's when your cortisol levels are extremely low in a state of stress. And without hydrocortisone replacement, it can be life-threatening. It's usually caused by a trigger or maybe non-compliance with medications as well.
There's another thing that we have to do sometimes. It's called stress dosing. So anytime that Thomas were to have like a high fever, like something over like 101, 102, we have to give what's called a stress dose. Because a normal person, whenever they're sick or have some sort of inflammation in their body creates 10 times the amount of cortisol to fight whatever sickness that they have. Because his body can't do that, we give a stress dose. So instead of him taking 1.5 pills at his normal time, he takes like 3 or 4 pills in order to mimic what your body naturally should do. But if there were a case where he was vomiting and he couldn't hold down that oral stress dose, we have an emergency injection that is given to him. And then after that, we're supposed to take him to the hospital.
Well, these Addison's, for example, that's an autoimmune disease. So we do not know what triggers that autoimmune disease precisely to happen. There's obviously a lot of autoimmune diseases someone can get, and Addison's is one of them. And so we can actually measure that antibody. It's called a 21 hydroxylase antibody. And so we do measure that, and that helps confirm that they do have, an autoimmune disease. And we necessarily don't know how to reverse that autoimmune disease. We know how to treat the end result of it, which is, we can treat what's damaged, but as far as actually stopping the autoimmune process of further damaging it, they haven't had a great solution for that. That's what they're trying to do with a lot of autoimmune diseases, targeting before enough damage has occurred where you're actually getting the disease itself. It's, you might have a predisposition to it. So some people have autoimmune diseases, they tend to run in families. It's not like a trait where you have that percent chance. And then plus you could get Addison's really at any age. It can happen in childhood, but it typically, I think, happens more in the adult ages after 20, but it can happen before then. We do see some cases, but I would say it's a pretty rare condition overall. It's interesting. I see way more with central adrenal insufficiency. You see a lot more kids with like brain malformations, or they've had brain tumors around the pituitary gland. It seems like actually all of that combined is more common than Addison's, at least in the under 18 age.
It made things a little bit hard. Like it was scary, especially when they were first diagnosed. Like Thomas was officially the first one diagnosed. Caden was the one who got sick first in 2010, but Thomas was the one who they diagnosed in the hospital during one of his admittances. And it was just scary. Like I didn't know a lot about it. I didn't understand, and they basically told me lots of things. Like it was like, oh, you got to make sure they always take their pills, and if they don't, they could go slip into crisis within an hour, or if they break a bone, you need to make sure that they are given a stress dose and brought to the hospital, or they could go into adrenal crisis and die within 30 minutes. Like these were all things that they told me. It was just scary anytime they got sick, because I just didn't know, is this the one time that the pills aren't going to work, or if something I do isn't going to work, are they going to not be able to help them? And so once they were diagnosed, it was a huge load of like knowing, okay, my kids have a lifelong, life-threatening condition that they'll have to deal with their whole lives. And that was a little bit hard, just because it was like, ugh, that's a lot. But having that knowledge at least made it better, where I knew, okay, this is what I can do to help them.
Yeah.